Hello, this is Fr Hightower, and welcome to Vox SFX, the voice of St. Francis Xavier Parish in Missoula, Montana, and sponsored in part by the Foundation for the Diocese of Helena. We are so pleased that you have joined us. Your participation enriches our community. We hope that our show serves as a point of light, helping to deepen our understanding and experience of the Catholic faith and history. Join us as we seek, through prayer, study, interviews, and discussion, the roots of our ancient mysteries.
Hello, and welcome to Vox SFX, the voice of St. Francis Xavier Parish in Missoula, Montana. We're very pleased that you could join us today. Today, we're going to be talking about a subject that doesn't immediately come to mind when we think about spirituality, and that is the idea of sports. But when we talk about sports, we often talk about what builds the player up, how we are able to take a person who may have athletic talent, may have natural ability, but make them into somebody great, make them into somebody who can perform consistently in a high-pressure situation. And how do we do this? Well, first we tend to the body. We make sure that a person is well-fed, that they train hard, that they are able to work out and do drills and know their teammates. This is a huge part, of course, about becoming a professional athlete. The next step is something we call sports psychology, which is getting inside the mind of the player. How do we maintain our focus? How do we maintain our sense of calm within and not let small setbacks get inside and give us the inability to perform consistently? But above that, we also have matters of the spirit. Because a person, when they enter the field, doesn't just leave their spirit on the side, doesn't just leave their God on the side, but takes them with them. So when we look at the spirituality, how does that affect one's performance on the field? Well, we often see a player take to the field and make a sign of the cross, or perhaps point to the sky in recognition of God. What are they doing there? What is the purpose of it? And what is the benefit of praying together as a team and having that bond as well? Secular universities may not have that particular practice, but in places where you have a religious institution that is the head of the university, we still often see that sort of prayer. What does that do for the team? What does that do for the individual? Here to discuss that with us today is Tim Hauck, a name that you may recognize if you're familiar with the National Football League. He was a part of several teams during his career and even walked away with a Super Bowl ring. So this is a man who knows very well how to include his spirituality when it comes to bringing it all, if you will, on the field. It seems to run in the family, too, this idea of sports and the idea of including that, because his brother, Bobby Hauck, is also a coach here at the University of Montana. So let's sit down with Tim Hauck and Fr Hightower as we discuss the spirituality of sports. With me in the studio today is Fr Hightower and Coach Tim Hauck, who works over there at the University of Montana. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thanks for having me, Nicholas.
So, we're going to be discussing an interesting concept today. You know, we've gone over some of the sacraments, we've gone over, we've talked to various people about their faith journeys, but sports and theology, it's an interesting combination of concepts. So, I mean, I guess the starting question that we have is, where does spirituality have a place within sports?
Well, I would say to be a successful athlete, whether you're good or not, you have to be grounded. And of course, theology and belief practice is one of the major things to ground oneself. And so right there, you have the mental ability to be successful regardless of your physical ability.
And I would say sports and life lessons in general kind of carry over together. And when you bring God into it, it's a calming presence and gives you confidence that He is with you and you're going to do things right and good things are going to happen to you.
So when we're looking at that, the calm is real. Having that support, having that boost to morale, I imagine would be really good. But does God have a favorite team?
No, one of the when I was at Gonzaga University, I used to always tell the players and the benefactors and the fans that God doesn't care who wins a basketball game. His mother does, but God doesn't care who wins a basketball game. And so when you see players doing the sign of the cross when they're up to bat, or they score a touchdown and they kiss their lips and point to heaven, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But God doesn't favor one athlete over the other athlete. What Christ desires, I would say, is that you use your body to the best of your ability. You use your gifts and graces that you've been given to the best of your ability, and that you've honed through good coaching and practice. And you use those to the best of your ability in sportsmanship. And that's how the theology enters into the program. And giving thanks for that when you're successful, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we should ideally be a grateful people, and athletes would be no different that way.
Well, we better say a lot of Hail Marys before the next game. After that's being said, I agree with you, Father. Exactly the same thing. God has blessed us with some gifts and abilities, and if we can use them in a platform or to use those gifts that He has given us to make others happy, I think that's a wonderful thing.
Mm-hmm. Other thing I'd add to that is the advantage of athletics, like at a university like the University of Montana or like at Gonzaga, or even a professional team like the Paddleheads here, the minor league baseball team, or the Bruins, the minor league hockey team, or going up to the NFL teams and stuff. I mean, you had, 9 years in the NFL, I think, or 8 years?
Well, I like to say when I left college, I spent 13 years wandering around in the NFL before I decided to become a coach. So 13 playing and 8 coaching.
Right. So the advantage that an athletic team made up of, whether they're student athletes or professional athletes, the advantage they have is they build community too. And not just community within the team and the teamwork and those life lessons you spoke about, but also in the environment. So it's for the university, for the town, for the city. That kind of community building is also incredibly important, and that's also what we do in the faith life, right? Is we try to build community, and so I think there's overlap there, quite frankly.
No, I agree with you 100%. Team is everything when it comes to football. I mean, obviously there's individual sports, but I think kids, young adults learn a lot from team. And again, like you said, church is the same way. It is a community, and you help one another, and you learn from one another, and you build together.
I agree. And one of the other things is also with a healthy faith practice, regardless whether it's Christianity or not, but with a healthy faith practice, recognizing that there's something other. It's not yourself. It's the one of the first steps of AA, right? Is it's beyond yourself. And so when you focus on the other, you focus on your teammates, you focus on the community, you focus on your school, that allows you to be more successful. And it also teaches you how to lose at times. One of the issues I think we face in our culture right now are, quite frankly, youth leagues that don't keep score. Everyone gets a ribbon. And so kids don't learn how to lose gracefully. And in a faith practice, we're all sinners. We learn how to lose, and we learn that there's some redemption taking place. And in athletics, it's the same.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it. None of us like to lose, but it happens, and it's part of life. And I think, again, you have hard times in life, and you turn to God. He can make things better for you.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's that grounding I started off with is okay, there's something bigger than myself here. Yeah, none of us like to lose. None of us like to sin. Ideally, none of us like to sin. But, God's redemption and hard work always pay off.
And I want to tap into that a little bit too. You were talking about how having a profound faith practice can kind of buoy us if we do lose. How do we teach students that? Because like you said, if we look at kindergartners or first graders, when they lose, they throw a big tantrum and they're all over the place. But we don't want to continue like that. Losing gracefully is a big thing. As a coach, how do you imbue that quality in your players?
Well, I think we all get emotional at times, and you see these outbursts and so forth, and by repetition and so forth, you just kind of teach that, hey, you got to move on to that, whether it's the next play, the next series, the next game. You've got to move onward and upward rather than staying low and down, where if you're upset and not focused, it's nothing but negative.
Sure.
I think the humility of having a good faith practice helps that too. Being humble, knowing that, I have these gifts and graces, and I've worked hard, and I've had good coaching, and I've had good support from my parents and my family and whoever it might be, but also knowing that, it's not all about me. I tell the story of my dad went from Butte. My dad was at Butte Central, and he went out to Seattle University to be an athlete. And we had at Seattle U, there was a guy by the name of Coach Logan, Francis Logan, who's is in 2 or 3 Hall of Fames. The softball field and the track are named after him now. Just a phenomenal athlete. But he's in 2 different handball Hall of Fames. And so he would go walk through the dorms, and he would knock on the door, and he'd tell the kids, he says, "Is your homework done?" And they say, "Yes." "Get to the gym." "Is your homework done?" "No." "Get it done." And so he walked into my dad's room once, knocked on the door, of course, appropriately. And he said, "I hear you're the 2nd best handball player in the state of Montana." And my dad said, yeah, I was number 2 in the state. And he said, "Why'd you lose?" And my dad said, "Well, the other guy was better than me." And Coach Logan, Father Logan said, "Where's he at now?" So it's my roommate right here. And so Coach Logan looked at the 2 of them and said, "So you're the best player in the state of Montana?" The guy said, "Yeah." And he looked at my dad and he said, "You're the 2nd best player in the state of Montana?" My dad said, "Yeah." And he goes, "I guess I'll play you left-handed." And he beat him.
Wow.
But I mean, again, it's being recognizing that, you can work hard, but there might be someone who's more gifted and graced. I think you'll agree with this. In professional sports and in college sports, there's always someone better than you. We call Tom Brady the GOAT. No, Tom Brady had great coaching, had a great line in front of him, and an incredibly, incredibly talented athlete. No question about it. But I'll tell you what, there's a kid back somewhere in the Middle East, or a kid back in Eastern Europe, who is a better athlete, but doesn't have it.
There's so many intangibles that come to it. And you talked about it a little bit. Discipline, routine, humility, it all comes together, and if you're missing any single part, it's going to affect your game. I always talk about players that are not overly talented but work extremely hard can be decent players. Players that are good, that work extremely hard, can be great. Great players that don't work very hard can be very average. Great players that work hard can be the Hall of Famers or the all-time greats. And we talked about Tom Brady right there.
Right. Yeah. You didn't start out you didn't coach high school for very long. I mean, your dad was a long-time high school guy.
35 years.
And I was fortunate enough to be the assistant to the assistant to the assistant in high school sports for a long time, especially with soccer. And the one thing I realized right away is the teams with the best athletes did not win us state championships. It was the team with the kids who worked the hardest and listened the most that won us state championships. And Bellarmine in Tacoma, Washington is one of the most successful women's soccer programs in the country, and it's because they have great coaching, phenomenal coaching, and they're kids who work hard.
Yeah, discipline and routine. There it is, right there, and it comes down, like you said, team. These players that work well together and make all these extrinsic schemes come together, they do extremely well.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that teamwork, like you were saying, is something that faith kind of teaches us already. When you're the member of a church or you're a member of a congregation, you're a part of something. Mm-hmm. You're not just an individual, and we come to the table, particularly as Catholics, and we share that together. And so that lesson, I think, if you've got that same sort of cohesion in your team, I mean, great players working on their own, I imagine, don't do as well against a team of people who are united and know what everybody else is doing at the same time.
Absolutely. Even in quote-unquote individual sports, you still have to have a team. You have your coaches, you have your trainers, you have the support staff. You have people around you that allow you to get there. I mean, look at USA Gymnastics. Incredibly gifted, incredibly talented, and they're quote-unquote individual sports, individual events. But they can't do that by themselves. There's someone there to move the mass for. The team is not just the student athlete or the professional athlete or the athlete on the field or on the court or on the pitch or on the mat. It's the team is the organization that supports that athlete.
Yeah, completely and totally. We talk about team and working together and so forth, and I think the other part is when you do have your leaders and your elite and they lead by example, that just brings everybody else around. And I think that's the same in your faith. If you lead your day-to-day life and lead it in a good way, in a positive way, and you're a good person, and other people look at you and look up to you, you bring them along also.
I agree. I think the origin of sports or the origin of athletics, going back to Greece, were spiritual practices. And even something in the Eastern tradition, something like yoga, it's a spiritual practice. So you can't separate out the two because then they're not complete.
Correct.
They're not complete. And so I think it's important to recognize that there's something else larger than self, no matter how talented I get to be. One of my running jokes when I was at Gonzaga, and people would say, well, what's it like to be on the bench? And I said, well, it's just like high school. I'm at the end of the bench in street clothes with no hope of getting in. It's also recognizing who you are and what your task is. My job was to be the chaplain to the team and to help them out. And I did a little sports psychology, and I did the masses for the Grizz when I first came here. There's a kind of a turnover with the priests over at Christ the King. And then when Father Kirby Longo got there, now he does the masses. And not all the kids go, but, they see that there's something else taking place here.
Right. Well, I want to touch on the idea of humility, because we were talking about these great players. And a lot of times, if you are a great player, you kind of need to acknowledge that in order to progress forward. How do we embrace these talents and gifts without letting it go to our head?
A good coach or a good parent or a good adult in a child's life gives them reality checks. There's a short video on Facebook right now with Shaq O'Neal, obviously an incredible athlete. And he talks about his rookie year where he just had a game where he was just horrible. And his dad asked him, what happened? He said, well, the pressure got to me. And his dad said, no, it didn't. I'll meet you at 5 a.m. And he's like, I'm a professional athlete. I'm going to meet you at 5 a.m. You meet me at 5 a.m. And so at 5 a.m. they drove down the street to this camp where this guy was living in a tent. And, Shaq O'Neal's dad looked at him and said, that's pressure. And the guy got out of the tent, and a minute later his wife got out of the tent, and a minute later 2 kids got out of the tent. And he said, that's pressure, not knowing where your next meal comes from. You don't have pressure on the court.
Right.
Go play. And you can watch that video online, but it's a reality check where people have to be honest and humble. Yeah. Say, okay, yeah, no. It might be hard to be out on the football field or on the basketball court or something like that. But in the big scheme of things, I'm very lucky and graced to be out on the basketball court and on the field. Not,
It's about putting it in perspective then.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree. I think sports in general are humbling. No matter how good you are going to have setbacks, whether it's injury or whether you all of a sudden aren't working as hard because you've had success and you have these setbacks, and then you really have to go back to ground zero and build back to where you were. And hopefully you get that second opportunity and build from those setbacks and become a better player, person, whatever it may be at that point.
Well, that sounds pretty difficult, actually. Coming back and when you've fallen from that place and you already know how much work it took to get there, I imagine it can be a little bit discouraging to want to approach that path again.
Well, it is. You almost have to just hit the reset. And I think I was there about my 5th year in the NFL. I went to Denver, and I'd been playing really good football, and I had injuries and did not play very good for 2 years and really thought my career was over. 7-8 months later, Seattle gave me another opportunity, and thank God that I had reset and gone back to my work ethic and done the things that got me to that point in the first place.
And you were, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were not drafted, right, out of the University of Montana?
No. The funny thing is there was 12 rounds of the draft then, and I still wasn't drafted.
Oh.
But you still made it.
Yes, so as soon as the draft ended, I got probably 5 to 10 calls from different teams, and they wanted to bring me to training camp and probably bring me in as a camp guy, as a body guy, not thinking you were going to make it. But with me, it was, okay, now I've got the opportunity. Let's make the most of this. And I went into New England. I led the team in tackles in the preseason, performed well enough to stick around on their practice squad, and then actually became their leader in special teams tackle that rookie year.
And from that, you worked your way all the way up to, with the Eagles, getting a Super Bowl ring, right?
Oh my gosh, it's so funny. And like I just said, I spent 13 years wandering around before I decided to become a coach. But I went from New England to Green Bay to Denver to Seattle to Indianapolis to Philly to San Francisco as a player, and then came back here to coach initially with my brother the first time around, and then got back in the NFL as a coach. And I think it was year 20 total that finally I got a Super Bowl ring, and against Tom Brady, which made it even better.
It's incredible.
And the team that you originally played for.
Yes.
So when you were in the NFL and coming from this position of relative obscurity to winning a Super Bowl ring, what place did spirituality, what place did God play for you personally?
I would say, one, motivational, keeping my drive and my mentality and my attitude and my faith that this is what I was meant to do. You've given me the gifts to do this. I know I'm capable of doing it. So let's do everything I can possibly do to play at the highest level. And then as things went on, I just think, just believing in God out there on the field that you're going to be safe, you're not going to get injured, you're going to be able to play at a high level. It's just a good feeling to know that there is a higher presence within you.
And there's just like in faith or in the church, there's a formation process that takes place. You learn as you go along and you're formed. When you look at, now it's 27, it used to be 28, but the 27 Jesuit college and universities in the United States, 23 of them, I think, play at Division I. And they're small schools, they're tiny schools, but they're very successful because there's a formation program that takes place in the classroom, in faith, and on the court. I think for football it's the same, right? There's a formation program, and you have the older players will take younger players under their wings and teach them how to do it. Just like, the acolytes will teach the altar servers how to do things, and, in a healthy way that can be very beneficial as we grow as individuals, as we grow as Christians, or grow in faith, and as we grow as athletes.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's everything we've talked about today, the humility part, the team part, and knowing God is with you and bringing you all together is special. The Catholic part really intrigues me, especially in football. There's only been, again, played for 7 teams. I've coached for, counting college, 5 or 6 teams, and every single one but one has Catholic Mass before games on Sunday. There was only one place that did not. Now they have a Bible study that non-Catholics will go to, but every single place but one had Catholic Mass.
Interesting.
Well, yeah, the NFL, when it started, was a Catholic league. It was a Catholic league. You think of all the big owners, they're all Catholic, and half the kids, some of the scandals that happened, played, 32 years old playing professional football and playing at a Catholic college, and, Vince Lombardi, but people don't realize that Vince Lombardi's first job after college was as the Latin instructor at St. Cecilia's in Jersey City.
No joke.
And he taught Latin and coached football, and then from there went to West Point. So it really was a Catholic league for a long time. The gentlemen played rugby, Americans played baseball, and Catholics played football.
I imagine safety comes into it too. When we're praying on the field, it's not just a matter, of course, of bringing that team unity together, but a lot of these things can be dangerous. Football can be a very dangerous sport. Basketball can be a dangerous sport. Baseball can be a dangerous sport too. So I imagine that this appeal to safety is also part of that.
Oh, for sure. And And you're always going to go out and play as hard as you can. And if you're worried about the injury side, usually that's when it does happen. So you try to keep it out of your mindset. But when you're praying before a game, you're not just praying for safety for your own team. You're praying for everybody out there that this is a clean, safe game and everybody comes out healthy.
That's where coaching and sportsmanship come in too.
Exactly.
If you do the way you're taught and you have good coaches and you practice good and healthy sportsmanship, then chances are you're not going to get injured. And there are freak accidents, right? I mean, there's the twists and turns, and that happens. But I think if you have good coaches who teach that safety and teach sportsmanship, and that's demanded from you by your coaches and by your fans and stuff, then the chances of getting injured are less. It's still going to happen.
Yeah, it's part of sports, like we said, but we're all trying to keep everybody safe. It's play as hard as you can, but we're not hoping for injury to anybody.
No.
Sure. No, and I mean, even in full contact stuff, they're not looking for that. I mean, I do a full contact sport my own self, and I've had all manner of breaks. I've broken my nose, I've broken several fingers, I have a rib that just sort of floats around because it's detached from my sternum, and I didn't necessarily pray before every match that I had, but I certainly know that when you're sitting there on the ground kind of gasping for air, you're like, oh, Lord, get me through this for sure.
Well, now maybe you'll start praying before that.
It was intermittent, but from what I've heard here, I think it'll be very, very beneficial.
The other thing I'd like to touch on in the spirituality part is really the community, what that does, the spirit core of, here over at the University of Montana, like when there's a football game or there's a basketball game or even, going up to the women's fast pitch games, the fans that turn out, the little kids running around cheering, the positive aspects of bringing together an entire community, a lot of whom did not go to the University of Montana, but they're still Grizz fans.
Sure.
Think about all the Gonzaga fans, the Zag fans around the country who didn't go to Gonzaga. I mean, when I started at Gonzaga back in '96, it was about 2,800 students. So I know they didn't go there. But I think that's a huge aspect of also maybe not pure spirituality, but trust and hope is definitely part of that.
Community, like you said.
Yeah, that trust and that hope. And again, not the hope that we're going to win all the time, but the hope that we're going to represent ourselves, our faith, our God, our school, our parents, our family, our coaches to the best of our ability. Sure. And that builds community because people want to be a part of that.
Yeah, it's very impressive what this community does for the university, and the support we have is unbelievable, and you love to see it. And for me, every Saturday, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe the number of people and how loud and they get and how supportive they are. And I would say 95% of it's positive. There's the 5% naysayers, but in this community, it is big, and always has been since I played here in the mid to late 80s. It's so positive. I've been places where it's not overly positive, and you don't like playing in places like that.
Sure.
Yeah. The Jesuit community for the Rivali Jesuit community, which is the Jesuit community here for St. Francis and St. Ignatius and Loyola Sacred Heart, St. Pat's to a certain extent, is in Lower Rattlesnake. And so on football home games, I can open my windows and I can listen to the crowd. I can listen to the loudspeakers and stuff. So it's kind of funny. Even Lower Rattlesnake, when I first came, we have the L, the M over here for Montana on Mount Sentinel. But on Mount Jumbo, there's an L, and it's for Loyola Sacred Heart. So it's for Loyola, which is, we're in the old high school right now in this sound studio. And when I first came, someone told me, oh, that L stands for Lower Rattlesnake. I said, no, it doesn't. It stands for Loyola.
Oh, that's funny.
That's a deep-rooted belief practice.
Oh, for sure. And, I mean, you take that field on those Saturdays, and you have chills. And it puts a smile on your face knowing all these people are here to support you. And the home field advantage we have because of that is special. Probably not a national championship run last year if we did not have that home support.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like you were saying about the sound, I live in the South Hills, which is like 2 miles away. But when I was still recording at home for my other podcast, I had to make sure I knew when the games were going to be, because otherwise the sound would bleed into the studio, and it was definitely noticeable. So you're right. I mean, the whole community turns out, and being in that stadium is just, the sound vibrates. You know, you can just feel it inside your own being.
That's it. It carries an energy by itself. And when you're down, it can lift you up. And if you're high, it just keeps you at that level. So it is special, and this is a special place.
It brings everything up. The Grizz football brings up all the other sports. It brings up the theater program. It brings up the music program. Sometimes there's this argument, though, sports aren't good, we should be doing more plays and theaters. And, well, to a certain extent, yes, that's true. But I know, like at Gonzaga, they opened 2 years ago, they opened a $90+ million theater. And that's part of it because of how well they've done in basketball and baseball and soccer and track and field. That, a good program, extracurricular program, whether they're at high school or university, raises everything. If it was just Grizz football and nothing else, it wouldn't be successful. So everything gets raised. And again, I think that's part of the community. And even right down to something as simple as fundraising. I know, in Spokane, and it's probably the same thing here, I would imagine. I don't know this, but you don't do your school auction. You don't do some of those things when the Zags are in town and playing at home. I mean, we'd never try to play. We'd never try to do an auction for St. Francis Xavier. We'd never try to do a fundraiser for Vox SFX on a night when the Grizz are playing in town or the basketball team's playing in town. You just wouldn't try to do it because the people that you're encouraging to donate are all over there cheering.
Busy. Right. So I had another question for you. You've been on both sides of things. You've been a player and you've been a coach. Is your approach to God, your approach to spirituality different in those roles? And if so, how?
I would say they're really similar. Probably selfishly, you're praying for two different things. As a player, you're really in tune to doing your job, whether it's physically or executing or staying healthy. As a coach, you're really praying and focused in on getting all the players aligned and in the right spot to where they can be successful. So individually, you're really concerned about yourself. As a coach, it's more team-oriented to a certain extent. Now, when I say individually, you do your job as an individual, then the team obviously plays better.
Sure.
Would you venture to say part of that skill set that you learned how to make that differentiation, you learned from your parents, learned from your dad?
Oh, there's no doubt about it.
Your dad was a coach for all those years. The part of the athletic center over at the Rita Mudd Center is named after your dad, right?
Yeah. And
your dad had to balance. Your brothers were pretty good athletes.
Yep.
Your nephews are pretty good athletes.
Yep.
And so I would imagine there was a balance that your dad demonstrated of teaching you to be the best you can be individually, but also that, no, you're part of this family, and you're not going to be better than your brother because you're a better athlete or this or that. And I'm not going to make comments on Bobby. I know he's the head coach. So, but I think that's part of it.
Well, we grew up in a great environment because my dad was a high school football coach in Big Timber for 30 plus years. And we spent the majority of our time either on the field or on the track or in the locker room where we learned the ins and outs of sports. But at home, we still took a little bit of the conversation to the dinner table, but it was family. And with Bobby and myself and our sister Katie, we really learned to have each other's back. And I always think as a football coach, you have a lot of naysayers. So we had to have a tight group and learn to bring everybody in and keep everybody tight.
And it's the same in faith.
There's absolutely.
A lot of naysayers about the church, a lot of naysayers about a belief in God, and you got to keep things tight. So I know this is why we do this, and this is where that mercy comes in. And
and that's a great example. And faith was always a big part of us growing up, and being part of the Catholic community in Big Timber, and then obviously Dad moving over to Loyola. I think he felt like that was a calling to go to the Catholic high school and become a big part of what they did over there.
Mm-hmm.
As you were talking about family, I assume that with that family, with that faith formation, that's like sports formation that it sounds like you had, really made your family tighter. It really seems to have united it as well. But how do you manage that time sink? Because sports takes time to go and train and not perform, but I guess perform in the game. But then there's also trying to manage family and faith. Like how do you find that balance?
I think it's priorities.
Oh, I'm with you there.
I think it's just simple priorities. I mean, I did a post. What positions do you know play?
Linebacker.
Linebacker.
Yeah.
So the Grizz have a linebacker who, goes to Christ the King Parish now because that's where Catholic Grizz is. But he went here, and when he was in high school, he won the defensive player of the game in the state championship game on a Friday night. Saturday he was at Mass. On Sunday he got confirmed. So a good weekend for him.
Sure.
But I mean, so here he is at the highest level of the high school level you can play in football, at least and he's still going to church, still showing up, going to his classes, and still got confirmed. And so I think it's priorities. If you want it to happen, you can make it happen.
That's a great example. I mean, Pat O'Connell, who plays for the Seahawks now, we'd go to away games and get in at 4 a.m. and he'd still be at St. Francis here at 8 a.m. Mass every single Sunday. And it's discipline, it's routine, but it is making your priorities what they are. Give a
darn. You got to have the give a darn.
Yeah, Pat was great. He would always, 8 o'clock Mass, he was always here.
Yep.
And he was very generous with the little kids. The kids would come up to him and stuff. And as soon as J.P. Batista at Gonzaga, who's now coaching at Gonzaga, was the same. As soon as that opening note started, families kind of went psh, and protected him, and he was at Mass.
Well, gentlemen, did you have anything else you wanted to add on this topic before we end for the day?
I think we covered how athletics helps us, how it helps us mentally, obviously how it helps us spiritually,
Mm-hmm.
how it teaches us to be humble and there's something better than ourselves or greater than ourselves. But doing it authentically and honestly and openly creates good sportsmanship and a lot of community camaraderie.
Oh, 100%. Life lessons on the field carry over to off the field, and being a good example and leading by example when you're in the limelight, I think is a big part of our faith and using those talents that God has given us.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, Father, Mr. Hauck, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Nicholas, thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
God bless.
Thank you for being with us today as we walk as pilgrims this road together. If you feel called to learn more, please consider checking out St. Francis Xavier or your local Catholic church. All are welcome into our community as God loves us all equally. If you are interested in supporting the Vox SFX podcast, please visit sfxmissoula.org/donate. Until next time, go forth in peace and be the light of Christ in someone's day.